In the final moments of the American Civil War, as the nation teetered on the edge of an uncertain future, Virginia's battlefield trembled with anticipation. Cannon blasts thundered through the dense morning mist, shaking the ground at Five Forks, a critical crossroads that would become the stage for a clash that could decide the fate of a divided country. Union General Philip Sheridan, a fierce and determined leader, was hell-bent on breaking the Confederacy's hold once and for all. Opposite him stood Confederate General George Pickett, burdened by the weight of his command and the looming specter of defeat. As dusk settled over April 1st, 1865, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Every sound, a branch breaking, a footstep on wet leaves, seemed to carry the weight of impending doom. Soldiers braced themselves for a confrontation where courage and despair would dance in a brutal waltz. The stakes were not just personal, they were historic. Would bravery and bold decisions turn the tide, or would this be the day history remembered as the Confederacy's breaking point? The battlefield, veiled in smoke and chaos, was more than just a ground for combat. It was a place where destinies clashed and legends were born. Each command, each volley of gunfire, sent ripples through time, altering the legacy of a nation fighting for its survival. The soldiers on both sides faced their deepest fears, knowing that every decision, no matter how small, could change the course of history forever. Here at Five Forks, courage met its ultimate test. But before we delve deeper into this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to support more engaging historical narratives like this one. On the stormy morning of March 30th, 1865, the Confederate troops under Major General George Pickett awoke to a relentless downpour. The torrential rain had soaked their gray uniforms, turning the ground beneath them into a muddy quagmire. These soldiers, already worn down by months of brutal fighting and harsh conditions, were marching westward from White Oak Road, following Colonel William Pegram's artillery units. The wheels of Pegram's cannon struggled through the thick mud, slowing their pace. To add to their plight, Union cavalry units were tracking their every move, increasing the tension among the weary Confederate ranks. Pickett's forces were heading toward a vital junction known as Five Forks, a few miles ahead. This strategic crossroads held significant importance. It was the key to maintaining control over the South Side Railroad, the Confederacy's last major supply line to Richmond and Petersburg. As Pickett approached Five Forks, he made a fateful decision. Instead of pressing forward aggressively, he chose to halt and form a defensive line, hoping to fend off an anticipated Union attack. His decision, though cautious, proved costly. Time slipped away, and by the late afternoon, Pickett's forces finally reached their destination at Five Forks. But the opportunity to reinforce the position more effectively had been lost. There, they met Major General Fitzhugh Lee's cavalry brigades, who had been fighting desperately to slow the Union's advance. The combined Confederate forces, though determined, faced a growing threat. General Robert E. Lee, fully aware of the dire circumstances, had ordered Pickett and Fitzhugh Lee to launch a preemptive strike against the Federal cavalry gathering near Dinwiddie Courthouse. Major General Philip Sheridan commanded the Union forces positioned there, poised to sever the South Side Railroad and cut off vital supplies to the Confederacy. If Sheridan succeeded, the fall of Richmond and Petersburg, and perhaps the Confederacy itself, would be inevitable. As darkness approached, Pickett ordered his troops to dig in, constructing defensive breastworks amid the relentless rain. The Confederate soldiers worked tirelessly through the night, understanding that the fate of General Lee's army, and potentially the entire Confederacy, rested on their ability to hold the line. By the morning of March 31st, the Confederate soldiers awoke to a bleak and desperate reality. For 10 months, they had endured the relentless siege of Petersburg, defending a 30-mile-long line stretching from Richmond to Petersburg and extending 6 miles southwest to Hatcher's Run. Union General Ulysses S. Grant's strategy of attrition had steadily worn down Lee's forces. The Union's constant flow of reinforcements, supplies, and artillery continued to apply unrelenting pressure, pushing the Confederate defenses closer to collapse. The Confederate soldiers were exhausted, underfed, and vastly outnumbered, but they remained resolved to hold their ground, despite the overwhelming odds. At Five Forks, on the morning of April 1st, Pickett and Fitzhugh Lee prepared for the battle they knew was imminent. Their strategy was simple but bold. Strike Sheridan's forces swiftly and force a retreat, buying the Confederacy more time to defend its supply lines and possibly regroup. However, at this crucial moment, Pickett made a critical error. He left the front line to attend to Shadbake, a nearby gathering that would later be criticized as one of the most ill-timed decisions of the war. With Pickett absent, the Confederate troops were left without direct command at a moment when coordination was crucial. Seizing the opportunity, Sheridan unleashed a massive assault on the Confederate position at Five Forks. Union infantry, supported by aggressive cavalry charges, smashed into Pickett's weakened lines. The Confederate defenders, though brave and resolute, were soon overwhelmed. Sheridan's forces had outflanked the Confederate positions, exploiting gaps in the line created by Pickett's absence. The Confederate troops, unable to reorganize effectively, found themselves in disarray. Despite pockets of fierce resistance, the Confederates were gradually driven back, unable to withstand the coordinated Union assault. The fall of Five Forks was a devastating blow to the Confederate defense. With the last line of resistance shattered, the Union forces gained control of the critical South Side Railroad, effectively cutting off the primary supply line to Petersburg and Richmond. The consequences were immediate and dire. By April 2nd, Grant ordered a general assault along the Petersburg front, resulting in the rapid collapse of the Confederate defenses. Lee, recognizing the impossibility of further resistance, ordered the evacuation of Petersburg and Richmond on the night of April 2nd. As the Confederates retreated westward, the situation became increasingly desperate. The once proud Army of Northern Virginia was now a shadow of its former self, reduced in strength and constantly harassed by the pursuing Union forces. Lee's hope of regrouping with other Confederate units was dashed by Sheridan's relentless pursuit. By April 9th, cornered at Appomattox Courthouse, Lee had no choice but to surrender to Grant, marking the effective end of the Civil War. The events at Five Forks not only marked a pivotal moment in the war, but also exemplified the consequences of critical decisions and missed opportunities. Pickett's failure to maintain command at such a crucial juncture, coupled with Sheridan's aggressive tactics, underscored the complex interplay of leadership, strategy, and timing that defined the final days of the conflict. Five Forks became a symbol of the Confederacy's last stand, a moment when hope gave way to inevitability, and the long, bloody struggle for Southern independence reached its end. The Battle of Five Forks serves as more than a lesson in military strategy. It is a story of determination, courage, and the profound impact of individual decisions on the course of history. The fall of this strategic junction accelerated the collapse of the Confederacy, hastening the end of a conflict that had torn the nation apart for 4 long years. As we look back on this crucial chapter in American history, we are reminded of the sacrifices made by those who fought, as well as the pivotal moments that ultimately shaped the nation's destiny. If you found this account engaging, please like and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth explorations of key events that shaped history. Together, we can continue to honor and learn from the past. The battle that followed was a fierce and desperate struggle. Union forces poured forward in waves, their relentless charge breaking through the Confederate defenses. The sounds of rifles cracking, artillery booming, and men shouting filled the air, creating a cacophony of war. Confederate soldiers, realizing their precarious position, fought valiantly, but were gradually pushed back. Many were captured, while others tried to retreat, but Sheridan's forces pursued them relentlessly. Pickett, upon learning of the disastrous turn of events, rushed back to the front, but it was too late. The Confederate line had crumbled, and with it, the last hope of holding Petersburg. As news of the defeat at Five Forks reached General Lee, he knew the end was near. The Union forces had succeeded in cutting off the South Side Railroad, effectively sealing the fate of both Petersburg and Richmond. With his army stretched thin and the city's defenses collapsing, Lee made the fateful decision to evacuate Richmond. The Confederacy's capital was abandoned, and Lee's forces began a desperate retreat westward, hoping to link up with other Confederate units and continue the fight. But the Union forces, led by Sheridan, Grant, and others, pursued them relentlessly, not allowing Lee a moment's respite. Over the next few days, the Confederate retreat became a chaotic struggle for survival. Supplies were scarce, morale was low, and the constant pressure from the Union forces made every step a battle in itself. On April 9, 1865, cornered and out of options, Lee finally surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, marking the official end of the Confederate resistance. The events at Five Forks had set in motion the final collapse of the Confederacy, a moment that would forever be etched in American history as a turning point in a war that defined the nation's soul. The story of Five Forks is not just one of battle tactics and strategy. It is a tale of human endurance, of bravery tested under fire, and of decisions made in moments of unimaginable pressure. It's a reminder of how the choices of a few can shape the destiny of many. As we reflect on this crucial chapter of American history, we see how courage, fate, and leadership converge to alter the course of a nation. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more engaging historical accounts that bring the past to life in vivid detail. In the waning months of the American Civil War, the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia found itself besieged and exhausted, fighting against increasingly insurmountable odds. The harsh winter of early 1865 had further drained their morale and resources, leaving General Robert E. Lee's forces significantly diminished. In February 1865, Lee's army had still managed to muster around 55,000 troops, but this number began to steadily decrease due to ongoing battles, heavy desertions, lack of supplies, and the unrelenting pressure from Union forces. By late March, their strength had dropped dramatically, making each confrontation more desperate than the last. Facing them was a massive and determined Union force of 128,000 men, consisting of three major armies. Major General George Meade commanded the Army of the Potomac, Major General Edward Ord led the Army of the James, and Major General Philip Sheridan brought in the Army of the Shenandoah to bolster Grant's plans. As the Confederates tried to hold on to Petersburg, General Ulysses S. Grant's strategy aimed at tightening the noose around Lee's forces, forcing the Confederates to defend the last vital supply lines and railroads that connected Richmond, Petersburg, and the deeper South. The most critical of these was the South Side Railroad, a lifeline for Confederate troops. If Union forces could cut this railroad, it would isolate Lee's army, making Richmond and Petersburg virtually indefensible. Grant's bold plan in late March focused on launching a series of coordinated attacks to encircle Lee's right flank, drawing his forces out of their entrenched positions. This would enable a concentrated strike at key locations, including the crossroads at Five Forks, a strategic junction that led directly to the South Side Railroad. In preparation, Grant ordered Major General Gouverneur Warren's V Corps and Major General Andrew Humphreys' II Corps to advance westward along Hatcher's Run. The mission was clear: maneuver around the Confederate flank and position themselves for a major assault. Concurrently, Sheridan's Cavalry Corps was tasked with sweeping movements to the left of the Union infantry, securing Dinwiddie Courthouse as a staging ground for the advance toward Five Forks. The objective was to establish Union dominance over the area and sever the Confederacy's last major supply line. On March 29th, the Union offensive began in earnest. Despite the heavy rains and treacherous terrain, Major General Roman Ayres' division led the charge, crossing Rowanee Creek by late afternoon after constructing a pontoon bridge under difficult conditions. As Ayres' division struggled forward, it was soon followed by Major General Charles Griffin's 1st Division and Major General Samuel Crawford's 3rd Division, each battling both the weather and the unforgiving landscape. Warren's men encountered stiff resistance, but they pressed on relentlessly, demonstrating the determination that had come to define Grant's campaign. Meanwhile, Sheridan's Cavalry Corps had set out before dawn with orders to reach Dinwiddie Courthouse. Major General George Crook's 2nd Division spearheaded the march, with Brigadier General Thomas Devon's 1st Division and Major General George Custer's 3rd Division following closely behind. Sheridan's troops, though drenched and weary, maintained their momentum, driven by the promise of a decisive breakthrough. Confederate scouts, however, quickly reported the Union movements to General Lee. Lieutenant General James Longstreet, recognizing the gravity of the situation, proposed forming a special task force to confront the advancing Federals. Lee, agreeing with this assessment, ordered General George Pickett's division to move from Richmond to reinforce the defensive effort. Additionally, Lee directed his nephew, General Fitzhugh Lee, to bring his cavalry division to Petersburg, effectively doubling the strength of the Confederate cavalry at the front. Despite the pouring rain and muddy roads, Pickett's infantry and Fitz Lee's cavalry converged at Petersburg, ready to confront the advancing Union forces. Fitz Lee, now in command of the Confederate cavalry, was tasked with defending the South Side Railroad at all costs. Pickett's brigades, led by Brigadier Generals Montgomery Corse, George Stewart, and Colonel Robert Mayo, boarded trains in Richmond and arrived at Sutherland Station by March 30th. As the Confederate reinforcements gathered, the air was thick with tension and anticipation. On March 30th, Sheridan ordered Major General Merritt to dispatch Devon's 1st Division northward toward Five Forks to scout enemy positions. However, just as Devon's cavalry set out, Sheridan received orders from Grant to halt the operation due to worsening road conditions. Sheridan, convinced that any delay would jeopardize the entire campaign, rode directly to Grant's headquarters and made a compelling argument to continue. Grant, recognizing Sheridan's determination and tactical insight, authorized the continuation of the operation. By the morning of March 31st, both Union and Confederate forces were bracing for battle. Pickett, aware of the impending clash, prepared to launch a counterattack aimed at Sheridan's left flank. Rooney Lee's and Rosser's cavalry divisions formed the vanguard, while Pickett's infantry made up the main body of the assault. The battle began with a series of fierce skirmishes at Chamberlain's Creek, where Brigadier General Rufus Baringer's Confederate cavalry collided with Union forces. The Union's New York Mounted Rifles, supported by the 6th Ohio Cavalry, initially managed to hold their positions, but the Confederate cavalry pushed aggressively. The 1st Maine Cavalry was sent across the rain-swollen ford in an attempt to reinforce the Union line, only to encounter the main body of Baringer's troops. Despite their best efforts, Union troops were gradually pushed back across Chamberlain's Creek. As the Confederates pressed their advantage, Pickett's infantry advanced through Danzas Ford, overpowering Major General Henry Davies' 1st Brigade of Crook's 2nd Division. The Union forces, struggling to maintain cohesion in the face of the Confederate onslaught, found themselves in a precarious position. Recognizing the urgency, Sheridan ordered Brigadier General John Gregg's 2nd Brigade and Brigadier General Gibbs' 3rd Brigade to launch a counterattack. Despite heavy casualties, the Union forces managed to stabilize their line temporarily, buying critical time for Warren's V Corps to move into position. As darkness fell on March 31st, the Union troops pulled back to Dinwiddie Courthouse, where they regrouped and prepared for a renewed assault the following day. Sheridan, determined to seize the initiative, devised a bold plan for April 1st. Warren's V Corps would spearhead a coordinated attack on Five Forks, supported by a massive cavalry charge. The plan was to overwhelm the Confederate defenders, break through their lines, and secure the crossroads, effectively cutting off the South Side Railroad. At dawn on April 1st, the Union forces began their assault. Griffin's division, leading the charge, advanced steadily toward the Confederate positions. The Confederates, caught off guard by the intensity of the attack, struggled to hold their ground. Pickett, who had left the battlefield briefly for a nearby shad bake, was initially unaware of the crisis unfolding in his absence. By the time he returned, the Confederate line was collapsing under the weight of the Union assault. Warren's V Corps broke through, capturing hundreds of Confederate soldiers and securing the crucial junction at Five Forks. The Battle of Five Forks proved to be a turning point. With the Confederate line shattered and the South Side Railroad severed, the fall of Petersburg was now inevitable. On April 2nd, Grant ordered a general assault along the Petersburg front, resulting in the evacuation of the city the next day. The loss of Petersburg marked the end of Confederate resistance in the region, forcing Lee's army into a desperate retreat toward Appomattox Courthouse. Pursued relentlessly by Grant's forces, Lee had no choice but to surrender on April 9, 1865, effectively ending the Civil War. The events leading up to and including the Battle of Five Forks were marked by a blend of strategic brilliance, desperate heroism, and human endurance. Each decision made by commanders on both sides carried enormous weight, shaping the final outcome of the conflict. The battle itself, though brief, was a microcosm of the broader struggle that had defined the Civil War, one of grit, sacrifice, and a relentless pursuit of victory. The Battle of Five Forks is more than a chapter in military history. It is a story of perseverance against overwhelming odds. It underscores the critical moments that shaped the course of American history, reminding us of the sacrifices made by countless soldiers and the complex decisions faced by their leaders. It also serves as a testament to the enduring spirit of those who fought, whether in victory or defeat, as they navigated the complexities of war and the weight of a nation's destiny. This story offers a window into the final, decisive days of the Civil War, a period marked by monumental shifts, both on the battlefield and in the hearts of those who fought for their beliefs. As we reflect on the Battle of Five Forks, we see the culmination of a conflict that had tested the very soul of the nation. For the Union, it was a moment of triumph, one that heralded the end of a long and bloody struggle. For the Confederacy, it was the last stand of a cause that had been both fiercely defended and fiercely contested. If you found this in-depth account of the Battle of Five Forks engaging, please like and subscribe to our channel for more detailed explorations of pivotal moments in history. Let us continue to learn from the past as we honor those who shaped it, one story at a time.